Everybody loves a good apocalypse, and the wild popularity of the Fallout series is testament to that. Fallout embraces science with the unbridled enthusiasm of your drunk dad at a wedding, and that's what makes it great! There's a sense that everything is rooted in the gritty world of real science, making it all the more threatening, but with a dash of over-the-top science fiction bombasticness to keep things exciting. Now, I'm a big fan of science facts, particularly if they're hot and fresh, so let's look at some now. I'm Ben from What Culture, and here are 9 little-known science facts that make Fallout even cooler. Number 9. Power armor. Exoskeletons. You can't talk about Fallout without talking about the power armor. The real question is, could you have one in, real life? Yes and no. Organizations such as DARPA are already working on powered exoskeletons for the armed forces, and while this won't allow you to stomp about the place with impunity like in Fallout, they would enable troops to carry immensely heavy loads and lift great weights. Granted, the reality is that sealing yourself into a suit and falling from a great height or taking some heavy fire is probably more likely to turn you into meat soup rather than a war machine, but technology-enhanced troops are on the way, make no mistake. Number 8. Synths. Robot rights. In terms of Fallout analogues, our current levels of artificial intelligence technology would probably enable us to create Gen 1 and perhaps even Gen 2 synths. The problem with Gen 3 synths is the process of creating an artificial living mind is as much an ethical problem as it is a technological one. Just as the Gen 3 synths in Fallout 4 insist that they should be afforded the same rights as humans, real-life robotics experts are having the same debates. What rights would an artificial consciousness have? We have already created an emotional robot whose emotional status affords her the right to be protected from both abuse and sexual exploitation, and I'm not lying, that's totally true. Her name is Pepper, and she's precious, don't hurt her. Number 7. MAD. Fallout was nearly our reality. The whole situation in Fallout is essentially an alternative reality in which the tactics of the appropriately named MAD, or Mutually Assured Destruction, doctrine failed to work as a deterrent and backfired spectacularly. With MAD, world powers worked to stockpile as many nuclear weapons as possible to ensure that any country that would choose to launch their nukes would receive return fire in hellish abundance. In the real world, we narrowly avoided this eventuality when on the 26th of September 1983, the Nuclear Early Warning System of the Soviet Union reported the launch of multiple USAF intercontinental ballistic missiles from bases in the United States. An investigation ruled the satellite had malfunctioned, but let's all be thankful the investigation was carried out at all. Number 6. RADROACHES. Megafauna. One delightful feature of the Fallout landscape are the giant bugs that plague your progress, but how did they get that way? Yes, perhaps the radiation caused the grow like crazy gene to flicker on, but there could be another factor at play, because the Earth has seen gigantic insects before. Meganeura is a genus of insects that were doing their thing around 300 million years ago. Around the same time, the oxygen levels in the Earth's atmosphere was at a record high, and scientists have long thought that the two were related. But if they are, then what does that mean for Fallout's megabugs? In a post-apocalyptic world, there are scientifically fewer fossil fuels being burned, and deforestation grinds to a halt, so the global oxygen levels may spike, and there are your giant bugs. Number 5. Ghouls. Radiation sickness. Whilst the idea of nuclear fallout creating a shambling race of immortal mutants is unlikely, the reality is that radiation does cause genetic mutations, so the idea is not completely off the table. Aging and death in normal humans is generally brought about by the shortening of a part of your chromosomes called telomeres. Perhaps it's possible that the mutations brought about by the nuclear fallout of the Great War could prevent the telomeres from shortening, meaning that cells that are replicated can be replicated indefinitely, as well as maybe possibly, hypothetically, damaging chromosomes in a specific immortality-causing way. It also causes damage that would cause the hair to fall out and the skin to blister and ulcerate. We call this radiation sickness, they call them ghouls. Number 4. FEV. CRISPRs. The forced evolutionary virus is one of the major reasons why the Fallout landscape is crawling with things that look like they've been dragged out of a drain. Slightly worryingly, there's a real-world analogue, and it's even better. You've probably heard of them. They're called CRISPRs. It's a fun acronym. The FEV is based on a retrovirus with its ability to insert foreign DNA into an existing genome. This is all fine and dandy, but it can lead to adverse effects such as sterilization, as the FEV views haploid gametes, the sex cells, as incomplete and corrects the error. CRISPRs are a genome editing tool. They're actually the naturally occurring defense mechanism of a wide variety of bacteria against the threat of viruses, but when we harness their power in the lab, we can do an unprecedented amount of genetic tinkering. With CRISPRs, you could create a genetically perfect human super soldier whatever, and one that can breed to boot, with none of the unpleasant side effects associated with the FEV. We don't currently do this thanks to those pesky ethical codes, but in the advent of a nuclear apocalypse, who knows? Number 3. Energy weapons. More powerful than lightning. When you've got a rad scorpion charging towards you, it's important to have a weapon to hand that will reduce it to an angry pile of ash. But how much energy does it take to vaporize an adversary? Well, the lovely people over at Nerdist did the sums, and it turns out that answer is a metric ton, or more precisely, 2.8 times 10 to the power of 9 kilojoules. Maths. In order to vaporize anything, you essentially have to eliminate the water in their body, and you do this by breaking the molecular bonds that hold the oxygen and hydrogen atoms together. It's not as complicated as all that. You do it every day when you put the kettle on, but as humans are around 70% water, you need a lot of energy to turn it all into gas. This is about the same amount of energy as is contained in 2 lightning bolts, all contained in your modest little energy weapon. Safe. Number 2. Why is there still food? Food irradiation. Whilst it's true that most processed American food would probably survive a nuclear holocaust, the following centuries might well see it decomposing into a mush. That is, if it weren't for all that lovely radiation. Ionizing radiation, as you may well be aware, is not super great for living organisms, and this includes the bacteria and fungi that might cause your food to rot. If the irradiated landscape was sufficiently deadly enough, perhaps the land was rendered so sterile that the food simply stayed in suspended animation because there was nothing there to eat it. We already know this works because we're already doing it. One method used for food preservation is exactly that, exposing it to radiation until all the bugs are dead. Eat up. Number 1. Let's talk about nukes. The Fallout future is frightening, but could it actually happen? Exactly how many nukes would it take to blow us all back to the Dark Ages? Thankfully, someone has run the numbers. Thank you! In the Fallout scenario, the nukes are generally a modest 200 to 750 kilotons. This massively reduces their blast radius, meaning that there's a smaller area in which you run the risk of being blown into your own shadow. But it does mean that rather than the radioactive material being thrown up into the stratosphere, it spreads through the lower atmosphere before their relatively short half-life renders them harmless, treating everybody within a 25-mile radius to a deadly dose of radiation. Using these figures to calculate how much you would need to wipe out both China and the United States, an area of nearly 10 million square miles, you would need about 422,000 nukes to flatten it. However, even at the height of the Cold War, there were only 66,000 nukes on the planet. But if we take into account that the Cold War never ended in Fallout and factor in continued production, we get 218,556 nuclear weapons. Still not enough. But wait, the 422,000 figure assumes that the population is spread out evenly across the landmass, which is just not how humans distribute themselves. We tend to densely populate certain areas. This makes popping to the shops easier, but also makes us sitting ducks for weapons of mass destruction. Given the population distribution of both countries, our new figure comes out at just 15.8% of our original estimate, or 66,676, and that is the number of nukes that actually existed at one point. So, with this massively reduced figure, the number of nuclear weapons that existed in the Fallout universe would have been enough to wipe out not just the American and Chinese populations, but the rest of the world too. And that's our list. Make sure you subscribe to the What Culture Gaming YouTube channel for more lists like this, and don't forget to visit whatculture.com for daily news and articles. I'm Ben from What Culture, and thanks for watching.